Welcome back, everybody, to the Uncensored CMO. One of the things I love doing on this podcast is meeting founders and finding out just how they did it. My next guest, Luke Boase, is founder of non-alcoholic beer brand Lucky Saint. And it's a really incredible story. Lucky Saint invented a brand where no brand existed. There was no non-alcoholic beer brand before they came to the market. They had loads of challenges, finding a brewery to launch with, launching during COVID and having no customers for a while. It's a really incredible story. Luke is a real professional who's crafted his brand and really focused on executing superbly and building a brand that didn't exist before. It's a really fascinating story, full of rich insight and loads of things you can learn about being an entrepreneur and about creating success. This is an amazing episode. I know you'll love it. My conversation with Luke Boase. In fact, Luke, let's start with, is Lucky Saint the biggest non-alcoholic beer?
It's not the biggest we're the biggest dedicated alcohol-free beer brand. So there's lots of the Heineken Zeros of this world. There's lots of alcohol-free versions of mainstream brands. But yeah, we're the biggest sort of challenger dedicated
now,
brand.
Before I get into the story, because I can't wait to hear more about it and a massive fan of what you've done. Tell us about life before Lucky Saint. What were you doing? And I'd love to know, what was the moment you went, I'm going to do a non-alcoholic beer brand?
So I always think I grew up in a family full of people who worked in advertising. So my mum worked in advertising, my dad worked in advertising, my sister worked in advertising. So the only thing I was ever going to do was go and work in advertising. And I used to spend university holidays and school holidays being a runner at production companies and loved it. And then for some reason, when I left uni, I thought before I went kind of like feet first into that, I should just like try something else. And so I got some work experience at a fund management company for 3 months. And then at the end of 3 months, they offered me a job and I sort of fell into it and ended up spending, I guess, best part of 10 years doing that. There were lots of, I guess my job was like looking at companies and kind of as an analyst. So I got really interested in businesses and trying to figure them out, but I was never passionate enough about it as a job to be able, I think, to love it and to be really good at it.
So if you take back to the analyst days, then how would you assess your own business now that you're a business owner with your analyst hat on?
I don't know. Well, I guess I sort of end up. I'm on the other side of the table now because we've raised money over the course of the journey. So always, talking to investors about what's the story? Why is it interesting? What's the opportunity? How big could the category be? Like, why does our strategy work? So all of that stuff I've always found really interesting and really enjoyed it.
Now you're creating the opportunity itself, right? So that must be fun.
Yeah, I like sitting on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
So I worked in that industry for 10 years, doing various, I guess, different nuanced around different things around similar role, and then ended up working for a Belgian entrepreneur who had a few different businesses and really looking for new opportunities for him. So again, on paper, really interesting role to go and find new things for him to do. And a few projects that we worked on were interesting. And then one day he had this oil and gas business in Kazakhstan. The agreement was always that I was there to do everything, work on any project apart from the oil and gas business, because they had 1,000 employees, and that's what I wasn't there to do. Anyway, he said, "Luke, could you just do me a favor and do one project in Kazakhstan?" Anyway, 2 years later, I was still working on projects in Kazakhstan.
Really?
I was London based, but it was all looking at projects out there. And so I guess kind of slowly but surely got a less and less motivated around what I was doing. And I guess I was also at an age where I was a bit like, what is my career going to look like? And in the kind of the nature of projects that sort of spin up and are very intense, and then when they spin down, I'd spend all of that time trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And in 2015, I met two founders of a technology business. So proper startup concept stage, business. And I remember so clearly sitting in a meeting in a meeting with them, and the level of passion and energy and the amount of belief they had in what they were doing was completely infectious. And I thought, God, I want to be on that side of the table. I want to be that excited about what I'm doing every day. And it just opened my eyes to the kind of the world of startups. And
I think we sometimes underestimate the importance of energy compared to the idea, don't we? We kind of think, oh, it's all about how clever the idea is. But actually, a lot of entrepreneurs succeed through just sheer force of personality and energy and commitment and never say die kind of attitude, don't they?
just sheer hustle.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, linked to your advertising background, I worked on Lucozade many years ago, and one of the campaigns we came up with was energy beats everything. The idea that actually it doesn't matter how much talent you've got, unless you've got the energy and the fight, you're not going to go anywhere, which I thought was interesting. But
so then, so I met these two founders of this technology business and kind of got obsessed about starting my own thing and trying to figure out what that would be. And a few ideas came and went. But the one I could never shake off was this idea of reinventing the alcohol-free beer category. Because in 2016, there was just two products in the market. There was a Beck's Blue and there was something called Bavaria 0.0. And I just thought, God, on paper, this is the best proposition in the world. For the right person on the right occasion, this idea of kind of all the experience of a beer without the function of the alcohol in it, on the right, what better proposition could there be? But the reality was I wasn't even a consumer of alcohol-free beer, and I sort of wasn't even close to it, but I felt like I just got very kind of emotionally attached to this idea of kind of taking this dusty old category and trying to make it aspirational.
So it wasn't that you were drinking non-alcoholic beer or you're frustrated you couldn't get the taste or you're on a moral crusade or anything like that. So it wasn't driven by that per se.
No, it was driven by the fact I loved the idea of the proposition.
Yeah.
I was obsessed by wanting to start my own thing, and I really enjoyed the process of, I guess, sort of road testing ideas and trying to figure out if, God, would it be possible to build a dedicated alcohol-free beer brand? And then you kind of get into, and there are kind of two parts to that. There's one, is it possible to brew a beer that's good enough to bring me and others into the category? And then is it possible to build a brand that will make people feel positive about that? Because I think if we go back, we've all done this thing. We've all apologized for not drinking. So whether that's sitting down with a friend and saying, yeah, oh God, I'm sorry, it's a Tuesday, I'm not drinking. You shouldn't have to apologise.
Well, it's also, if you go out with some friends, like in the middle of the week, and they're all having pints, and then you're driving or whatever, and you get a 250ml orange juice, you feel like you really feel like you're not part of the evening, do you?
Yeah, completely. So then, I guess then the sort of analytical part of me was then trying to figure out if it was even possible to build, was the category even big enough to build a brand that only did one thing? And the pretty short answer was no, because at the time, the category, it was a £60 million category in retail, which means that, I guess, if you then sort of back that out at the brewer's level, that's probably a £30 million category. And if you got a 10% share of category, it's a £3 million business, which probably isn't viable as a standalone business. I guess the big insight came when I figured out that in the UK, at this point, 0.5% of beer sales were alcohol-free.
0.5%.
So it's this tiny, tiny category that sits across the bottom of the beer market. But in Germany, it was 6% of beer sales, and in Spain, it was 14% of beer sales. So all of these other European countries just had these huge alcohol-free beer categories. And then, so it then just became about figuring out, well, why has the UK been so left behind? And at that point, you get the belief, and this, I guess, to the point on telling the story and pitching the story. That's what it is. It's well, yes, it's tiny now, but if the category becomes 5 or 10% of beer sales because consumers are all moderating, then it becomes a much, much bigger opportunity.
I'm intrigued by the fact you decided to build non-alcoholic only brand as well? Because the other beers you referenced have all got very well-known, alcohol variants. Certainly, so you got Beck's Blue, or Peroni, you got Peroni 0%. How challenging was it to make the brand just dedicated non-alcoholic when you don't have the advantage of all the equity and the heritage and the taste credentials of those kind of more mature brands?
I guess
or is
that,
it an advantage?
I guess that was the opportunity, because it gives you suddenly permission, all the restrictions of having a mother brand that's a full strength beer, all of the conflict that exists within, well, how do you sell an alcohol-free beer and that proposition while also selling the proposition of a full strength beer, all of the kind of conflict that's inherent in that, and actually just being able to have a unique perspective on alcohol-free beer that's not kind of tainted by full strength beer was always the really, really interesting bit. And that opportunity to be like, look, this is the one thing we do. This is the product that we live and die by. And that specialism means that we're able to produce a better quality product, which was always, I guess it's the bit that it took the longest from the original idea in 2016. We didn't launch until the end of 2018.
Wow. So what? So 2.5 years or so?
Spent 2 years working with 6 different breweries in 3 different countries, trying to figure out how to brew alcohol-free beer well.
That's quite an investment from them as well, presumably, because, I mean, you didn't have any pre-orders, did you, at that point? So how do you convince them to invest the time and energy and that it takes to come up with the recipe and brew when you're a small brand?
Yeah,
well,
non-existent, no brand.
Yeah.
Just like me and a story going around to originally to like breweries in the UK and trying to build relationships with the right people and convince them that it would be an interesting way for them to spend some of their time. But it was pretty hard. And actually the same thing happened on repeat, really, as I sort of worked my way around, was I'd sell the idea into a CEO or an owner of a brewery, and then they would say, oh, actually, that sounds kind of interesting the way you tell it, like maybe there's something in this. This was way before alcohol-free was of any interest to, like, it's now like there's so much interest in the category, but wind back 7 years, there was no interest in the category.
So how did you convince them?
I guess that same story. Look, here's a category that is actually, it's growing underlying. So there's been 12% compound annual growth, like year after year after year in the category, despite the fact that there was no innovation, despite the fact there weren't great products, despite the fact there was no like marketing around the category. And I think actually the anecdote I always used to say, I think this is what tonic water would have looked like 15 years ago.
Nice.
And then they go, oh, maybe that is a, and then they'd convince their head brewer or their brewmaster to spend some time on it. But usually you do one brew and it wouldn't be very good, and then you do a second brew and something would go wrong. It would get infected or something would go wrong, and then I'd get the call from the owner just being like, Luke, I'm sorry, we've got a lot on. My head brewer's not into it. We're going to have to park it. So I'd kind of try and take the learnings from that relationship and then take it on to the next one and go again and again. And anyway, we managed to get there in the end.
If I can ask, at this time, have you got a job at this time? How are you funding yourself?
So I've still got a job.
You've still got a job. So this is all done in the background while you're doing Kazakhstan investing and that sort of thing?
Well, looking at extraordinary projects in Kazakhstan. And
sounds like the title of a movie, doesn't it? Extraordinary projects in Kazakhstan.
There's probably a whole podcast you could do on the things that happen out there. But anyway, like evenings, weekends, downtime. I mean, I remember after I'd figured out, I guess, quite a lot, and there was I'd gone through 5 brewing relationships, and there was still a particular technology that I really wanted to try that wasn't available in the UK, was available in Germany. And so I kind of got back to my research and got really excited about a brewery in Bavaria who I found out had this particular piece of technology that I was looking for. And they also brewed their like amazing lagers in their own right. And I got hold of the CEO's email and did my kind of wrote my, when you craft those emails that you're like, I don't have a lot, I can't say very much here, but I just need to land enough of the bit. Anyway, I sent this like nice email and I said, look, I'm in Germany on Friday. I'm in the area. Can I pop by? It's just pure love.
Classic hustle.
And I can't tell you how many of these emails go totally unanswered over the course of 2 years. And he responded in 2 minutes. And he said, sure, pop by at 1. Which gave me a bit of a fright because I was like, shit, I've got to get out there now.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
But anyway, went over there and I guess went through the pitch with him, and the bit that I guess I remember the meeting so clearly, and you walk into this kind of amazing, old, very kind of traditional looking German Bavarian architecture building, and it was totally deserted, and I walked in the front door and I was just walking around looking for anyone to find anywhere. Eventually I did find my way to the CEO and sat in his office, and it was explaining what I wanted to try and achieve. And I was not getting a lot of his eyes weren't lighting up with excitement until got to explaining this bit around just how low the penetration of the category is in the UK compared to Germany, and then what the range of products available were. And I think that was the bit that kind of got him going. He's like, oh, okay, well, I think the problem is there isn't good enough product for the category at the moment. And he slammed his fist on the table and marched me over to the across the courtyard to the other side of the brewery to meet the brewmaster. And we literally, we started talking about what the beer should look like, and it went from there.
I'd love to know, have you met any of the people that turned you down recently from before?
Yes, some of them. And
somewhere, sit there going, that's the one that got away. Jeez, we didn't see
that. Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, the one who I haven't seen, but I would love to see. So I remember in the really early stages of trying to figure out, I was trying to find anyone to brew, because I had no experience in beer, no experience in I didn't have any experience in anything that was relevant, actually. But I managed to get a call with a guy who'd been CEO of one of the major craft brewers at the time, and I was so excited by this call. So I was like, this guy's going to be the answer to all my questions. And I'd done my prep for the call, and I remember I was sitting in the stairwell, hiding at the office, but I had to be in the stairwell so no one could hear the conversation that was going on, and all the anticipation. And actually, he was out in the middle of buying a bacon sandwich and a coffee, and he just completely panned the idea. He was like, "Yeah, we looked at it. The category is tiny. We know, I've got the best brewer in the UK. If he can't do it, no one can do it. I think you'd be better off making fizzy drinks."
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
What I love about that story is I've got a theory, because if I was to launch a soft drink in the UK, I've probably got as good experience as you could possibly expect. 20 years, done lots of innovation, worked in small, big companies, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes that's a constraint, because I would know all the things that could go wrong. I'd know the statistics are stacked against me. I'd know the buying power of Coke and Britvic and people like that are dominate 90% of the shelves, big JBP agreements with retailers. I could tell you 100 reasons why you shouldn't launch a soft drink. I just wonder whether the fact you didn't have any industry experience, in a weird sense, actually was part of the advantage, because you weren't necessarily going in. You're going in with optimism, maybe, rather than going in with here's what could go wrong.
Yeah, blind, naive optimism. But I think that's the only.
But I think that happens. A lot of entrepreneurs actually don't innovate in the area they got experience of. They often look at other categories and take a fresh perspective, and it carries them quite far.
I think so. In a sense, there's definitely some advantages. You definitely are able to go faster if you know the answers to stuff. Yeah. But I don't think you probably don't challenge things in quite the same way.
That's true. Yeah.
Interestingly, I think that the branding kind of journey that we've been on and kind of creating the brand was fraught with loads of things I guess could have done better, but I guess, the kind of relentless pursuit of trying to, I had something in my mind's eye that I couldn't necessarily articulate, but you just kind of relentlessly kind of have to keep going with it and eventually figure it out. And I don't know if you've got tons of experience, you get to something that's familiar or you've done before, or so if you want to kind of create something different.
You're probably more like to follow the category codes, aren't you? That's
exactly
expected rather than take a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
So before we get onto the branding and the beer itself, I'd love to talk about that. At what point did you give up the day job? And actually, when did this become your full-time?
So I went full-time at the beginning of February 2018. And the point in the journey with the beer was done. So I had like confidence on that. We created a brand. I had a deck to go out and like raise some money with.
Now, did you have to raise the money before you sold a bottle? So were you raising money to kick it off, or do you invest yourself in it to get it going in the first place?
I mean, I'd invested a lot in getting to that point. I think one of the things I always wanted to ensure that there was obviously I wanted the best result possible, but also I've always kind of like set myself the objective of like, it's fine for this not to be successful, but I don't want to spend 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years figuring out that it's not successful. And one of the ways to, I guess, like put the tension in and make it go faster is to put proper investment behind it and find out. And failure is fine, but I'd rather
because I think that's a conundrum
quickly.
A lot of people face actually is well, you got a number of things going on because how much do you have to prove the concept before you get the investment, and also people are fearful about giving away equity in something early particularly. So you got all those dilemmas going on. Then you got to, how do you make a living as well, because presumably you need to pay the rent and that kind of stuff as well. So how do you balance all those kind of conflicting demands on you?
Yeah, I did. I had a bit of a coup out of my last job. I did manage to be made redundant, which was helpful. So that helped with kind of surviving the very early months, and then went out to, I guess, started going out and raising some money and kind of talking to people for the first time about the idea.
What was the feedback? So it's because presumably you'd in your head this is unstoppable right at this point. Yeah. What happened when you broke cover with the idea and started presenting it?
Well, so I went out with the brand was called Not Another Beer Co, or NABCO for short. Basically, I guess in the run up to that, had developed this brand, and funny enough, with all of the right kind of like strategy and thinking behind it. And then I'd gotten distracted with the naming part and kind of insisted on this name of Not Another Beer Co. And we'd ended up with a design route because of that kind of it all fed off the name. And the opening slide on the presentation was not Beck's Blue, not apologizing, not a range extension, not just another beer. So it was quite kind of provocative.
Manifesto-y,
yeah, it was like, so it definitely got your attention. Some people liked it and were like, great, Luke, I'd love to support you. And some people said no. But unless someone can articulate, I guess I probably always knew there was something not quite right about it. But I'm a solo founder. I'm totally on my own. Having the kind of courage of your convictions is quite difficult. And so you sort of just keep going until I got into, well, I didn't get introduced. I knew of a guy called Ben Bilball who founded an agency called Karmarama, an ad agency. And I was like, I tell you what, I'm going to send the deck to Ben and maybe he'll put some money in. I sent the deck to Ben and he emailed straight back and he was like, interesting, Luke, let's have a call. And he picked up the phone and literally the first words I think out of his mouth on the phone call were, I love the idea of building a brand in a category that has no brands. Super, love all of that. How far down the naming and branding route are you? And I was like, yeah, sort of ready to hit print. And he said, I think you should start again.
How did you take that?
Well, he then articulated really, really succinctly why. And he said, well, look, what you've done is you've started with a name, that is positioning yourself in opposition to a category. And so you're naturally, creatively, you're just going to continue to get pushed into the defining yourself by what you're not rather than by what you are. And he said, funny enough, it's quite easy in the beginning to do that because there's this like natural enemy and, but over time it will creatively become harder and harder because you'll run out of ways to define yourself as different. And he explained it as quickly as that. And in that instant, I was like, in my head, it was like, tore it up and stuff.
And you ditched your name, right? So how long does it take to go from that point to Lucky Saint?
So then it took 2 months.
Okay, that's pretty good. So
I then went to Jono and Stu and Ben at Otherway, who, funny enough, I'd met very fortuitously. There's a number of like Lucky Saint kind of serendipitous coincidences that have happened along the way. But meeting them was one of those that happened off the back of my leaving do from my old job. But anyway, Jono went straight back to them and was like, having been talking to them about, could you help me with launch and stuff? It's like, actually, we just need to start again. So they then helped with everything through naming, identity, and really like help set the playbook and like write kind of this really clear playbook around what Lucky Saint was going to be. And the interesting bit, it was quite quick actually, because all of the kind of original strategy work and insight that had come like in all of the previous work was still all relevant, and it was all still the right work. It was just we needed to start with a better name.
And if you look at the beer category, you've either got like provenance, haven't you? Where are you from, or you've got punk, kind of craft, alternative hip hop sort of thing, haven't you? And then you've got this very different position. I mean, you've even got a nun in your poster, which is like very unpunk.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of one of what we call our call to arms is break rules, honour traditions. Because there's a whole load of category conventions that we should absolutely like stand by and borrow because they work and they're helpful. So we should honour those things. But then there's a whole load of rules that we can break along the way that will make us different and more interesting. So yeah, lots of the original insight around like just understanding how the category works, and actually the ambition was and is like to build the world's defining alcohol-free brand, which means we need to be ubiquitous for our audience. And in order to do that, we're going to have to be distributed in a hell of a lot of different places. And if you just think about hospitality, we want to be listed in Michelin star restaurants and 5-star hotels. We also need to be listed in casual dining, in Honest Burgers, in Pizza Pilgrims, and we want to be listed in the coolest parts of East London, the gastropubs of West London. And so the brief was always like trying to create an identity that can sit comfortably in all of those different environments. And the thread that always comes back through it is it's all about quality. So the biggest driver of decision making in the category is taste, and so therefore quality is the most important. It's the most important thing we can do. And whether we're talking to the bar manager in a Michelin star restaurant or a 5-star hotel, or I'm talking to Tom at Honest Burgers, it's exactly the same story about the way that we produce the beer and the quality. And that's consistent across everything that we do.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you have a Beck's Blue, for example, or a Peroni 0%, you're always left with it's not quite the same though, is it? It's sort of a bit watery. It's not quite the full taste. By the way, we should say for anyone watching, this is it. Anyone listening, we're enjoying a bottle as we speak. But it does have that full-bodied, proper beer taste, doesn't it? Which is really pleasing. You don't feel like you're missing out. Or trading down somehow, like you do with other.
Yeah, so the body thing was always like, I think that's the biggest challenge. Like alcohol-free beers traditionally don't have much flavour or kind of mouthfeel and body to them. And what we ended up doing was, so Lucky Saint's an unfiltered lager, which means it therefore retains, you don't go through this process of filtering the beer. So if you filter the beer, it gives you a clear, bright beer, which is what we traditionally think of as lager. But by leaving it unfiltered, it means you retain more of that flavour and body, and you get this like wonderful kind of hazy, slightly hazy beer. The bit I love about Lucky Saint, and when you get it, a perfectly poured pint, and it's this kind of straw-coloured, slight, just a tiny bit hazy with just a perfect cap of white froth on top. And it was exactly how it was. I remember the first time I tasted it at the brewery in development, flying over to Germany and walking into the brewery and being handed this little half stein of like perfectly poured beer, and just thinking, but we've done it, we're there.
How many iterations did you go through before you got to that point?
4 or 5 in Germany, and then like many across 5 different brewing relationships before that.
Now, one of the fascinating things I think about Lucky Saint is you're a one like beer brand, which is really unusual, isn't it? I mean, when you think about most brands by now would have done Lucky Sinner, that have done the kind of, the red version and the blue version, and, spun off in all sorts of places. You've stuck very religiously, haven't you, to this product. Is that a strategy? Have you intentionally ruled out doing lots of spin-offs of the brand?
100%. 80% of the world's beer consumption is lager. So my belief is if there's going to be a defining alcohol-free brand, it'll be defining by producing the world's best alcohol-free lager. So anything else that we do risks distracting from that mission. So therefore have always been, always resisted. We could definitely be a bigger business if we had, more products, but would we be as focused and as kind of famous for one thing? And I think there's great power in that.
There's something about the constraint of just having one thing, isn't it? That means that you're focused on making that one thing even better rather than because you get very busy, couldn't you, doing other things? Yeah. A bit like Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull, I think, is one of the outstanding innovations of the last sort of 20 years, isn't it? And you think they've achieved enormous turnover through one product by just being amazing at it.
And it was one of the things. So Jam Jar are one of our investors. Jam Jar was founded by the 3 Innocent founders. I remember Rich Reed talking to him about this, and Red Bull, because Red Bull and Innocent launched in the same quarter, I think, in the late 90s. And just the difference between those two businesses and like building around one single product versus Innocent, who've built around, a really big range now. And he said the opportunity to build a like iconic single product brand doesn't come around very often. So you should go after that really hard. Yeah,
because when you think about it, you think of Coca-Cola, don't you? Or you think of Red Bull. I mean, there aren't many. It's a very good point, that. Now, I'm glad you raised investors. You've got a pretty awesome list of people investing in your business. Talk to me about some of the people that have invested and how they're helping you on the journey.
Yeah, we've got an amazing cap table. Who have we got? We've got Jonathan Warburton, who has been an amazing supporter since before launch in 2018, and we've got obviously the Jam Jar guys, who are the most amazing investors, because between Adam, Rich, and John, they all provide different insights.
That's insane to have those people
So
and do they give you advice? I mean, do they get involved in decisions and help and stuff like that?
So Adam sits on our board. So he was the kind of commercial kind of part of the trio. John has supported us on, I guess, like production projects and things around like systems and how we should set ourselves up. And then Rich, I set up one of the things. I guess one of my jobs is always to try and figure out how we can leverage the amazing cap table that we've got and the amazing investors who are on it. So Rich sits on our brand council, which is him, Shailen Patel, who's our chairman, who was ex-Guinness and Diageo from back in the day, and then ran Distill Ventures. Oh, yeah. So Ben Bilbul, who's obviously Camarama, Jono from Other Way. So they make up the brand council, and I try and always, I guess, run not too often, but always I try and put important stuff in front of them. And Rich is always brilliant, actually. He's like, if we're trying to do like something new, he's a bit like, no, you've got the most incredible brand. Like the copy and the tone of voice is awesome. Like, don't change a thing. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's great to have that sort of backing to not get distracted by trying.
Well, he's seen the other side, hasn't he? You know, to a brand get to scale and market leadership. It's true because the temptation to keep changing, isn't it, and try new things is very real. And you've also got some famous ad people as well on your team, investor team, haven't you, as well?
Yes, we've got James Murphy and David Golding, who are Adam and Eve founders, Ben Bilbul. So yeah, we've got some. So
why haven't you come up with adverts? You have a really big debate about the advertising now.
I mean, it's been amazing. So that, like NCA, which is James and David's new agency, they did our January campaign in 2022. But the original work, so the Nun, actually came out of a piece of work with Karma that we did right at the beginning, which was just an amazing coup. If you imagine, we launched in October, and Ben very kindly invited us into Karma for like an afternoon workshop with. There was like, there's just lots of directors, and it was quite intimidating going in and being a bit like, we don't know what we're doing here, but like, and so ran a kind of, I guess, a brainstorming on the brief was like, how can we bring the brand to life? Like, we just launched 4 weeks earlier. The reception on the product was amazing when we launched. We were winning loads of new on-trade distribution. Everything was really good, but we didn't have anything really beyond a bottle of beer. And so the brief was like, what could we do for January in terms of sort of bringing the brand to life and doing something interesting? And the kind of creative idea that kind of rose to the top was unexpected lucky saints. And of those, then this idea of a nun drinking our beer was the one that like very quickly rose to the top of that.
Which is very surprising, isn't it? And it's also beautifully kind of shot, isn't it?
Yeah, so it was shot by Rankin.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So Karma.
You're putting in quite a few favours at this point, aren't you?
It was just a total coup because we had no money. The brief for the thing was like, we have zero budget for it, and Karma were like, well, what we could do, we're not going to have any media money to put behind it, so this is going to be a PR exercise. So could we get someone interesting to shoot a nun with Lucky Saint? And we sent the brief into Rankin's office and said, look, we don't have any money, but like, here's a brief. And he said, look, I'm free next Thursday.
So you got the creative agency doing it for free, Rankin's photographing for free. How do you pay for the media?
We didn't. We fly posted it in Shoreditch. And that was, we had a little bit of money, and there's always like, nothing is totally free. But yeah, it was like working with him was pretty amazing because I remember he's got a very big team, and everyone gets the Nun set up, and you got the agency team there, and like it's all going on, and then he walks in, like steps into the camera, and like someone's just sort of holding the camera strap ready open for him, and he steps into the camera and starts taking photos, and you see them flashing up on the screen next door, and like immediately just getting these like magical images. So it was like, it was properly like, wow, this, just incredible to see him working. And then fly posted that around London. And funny if it got like more visibility than I kind of anticipated. Like people definitely saw it, but we didn't. It wasn't until this January just gone that it was the first time we put actual like proper money behind it.
Really? Because I'm sure I've seen it before this January, so I must have read about it maybe, or it's on our website. Online,
and it got lots of marketing press in 2019. Yeah, it was this January was the first time, and it's become like it's our sort of most distinctive asset, and it sits at the top of our like brand hierarchy. So that shot of the nun then flows down into the kind of studio images of like hands holding up, like all the kind of religious hands holding the beer. So yeah, it's ended up being the very kind of the very top of our brand hierarchy, and kind of everything flows visually sort of flows down from it.
The religious connection is quite interesting, isn't it? Because of course, lots of beers go back to monasteries and monk brewing traditions, in Belgium and that kind of thing. So there's not an impossible connection.
Yeah, because from a naming perspective, the original name that we had, and the very first route that Other Way showed me when they did the kind of here's 4 concepts, was called Saint. And it immediately gets you because it has this sense of like, it sort of sounds like a name that can live in the beer world, and it has a sense that it's been around. We couldn't get the trademark on it. So we ended up sort of abandoning that and going on a very wild goose chase around lots of other names that took many, many weeks. And then from nowhere, Jono came up with like putting an adjective with Saint, and it was Lucky Saint was like, boom. The kind of the bit that's then come out of that, and the dichotomy of like basically all the stuff I think that works in Lucky Saint has this dichotomy in it. So there's a dichotomy in like Lucky and Saint are 2 words that don't belong together. The nun and the beer are 2 things that don't really belong together. The idea of an alcohol-free beer in itself is a dichotomy. So that's ended up this idea of like break rules, honour traditions. And the dichotomy in that has ended up being something that sort of flows through everything that we do.
That's really smart. I can see that. So you've got your name, you've got investors now, you've got some pretty good, pulled in a few good favours at this point. What's been the secret from that point to scaling to where you are today? I mean, how big is the business today? How many people do you employ now compared to when you were going around Germany convincing, brewers to take a punt on you?
So today we're a team of 60. So in COVID, I guess, there was that kind of the pre-COVID era. So in COVID, we were a team of 6. So in the last 3 and a bit years, we've gone from 6 to 60. That's been definitely kept us busy. Yeah. But that, I guess, the sort of sequence was I spent the first 18 months doing almost nothing other than building distribution in hospitality and working with all these like incredible accounts. Which in turn meant that we weren't brilliantly placed when a pandemic came along. Yeah. And so, instantly lost 70% of our business, disappeared. I remember Shalene calling me kind of early-ish part of March. And we'd actually just had a board meeting where we'd launched Draft in January, where we'd sold 3 months stock in 3 weeks. And it had been this like wild success that everyone had questioned whether it was ever going to be possible to like sell alcohol-free beer on draft. And then had this board meeting at the beginning of March with 2 plans. There was fast and faster, and everyone got revved up about the faster. And then a week later, Shalene called and he was like, just might be worth running the numbers just to see what would happen if you have no revenue, no cash receipts for 12 weeks. And it was pretty bleak. We had 3 weeks of cash.
Wow. This is as the pandemic was starting to.
So this was
hold.
Just as literally all. Do you remember the rumour mill started?
Yeah, Italy. People getting it in Italy and all sorts of stuff.
And is it going to come here? And what does it mean? And the worst case scenario was there was going to be like 12 weeks of shutdown. And we'd been due to go and basically I was about to like go out and raise some money. So we didn't have much money. And then you just put through the fact that we still hadn't been paid for January because we'd had this amazing month. We sold all this beer on draft, but the way that the payment cycle works, you get paid end of month 30 days. So you sell everything January, it's due at the end of February. Hospitality by the end of February was getting very nervous, so they weren't paying their wholesalers, which means the wholesalers didn't pay us. So we were still there was just no cash moving at all. And then, lost on-trade, obviously all shut, all stopped, lost 70% of our volume. And then, there was only one channel left open, and that was D2C. And I remember I think it was the day before the official lockdown and all the stockpiling stuff started happening. And we had this amazing day on Amazon. So we were set up. We were fortunate in that I'd been testing kind of D2C and e-com as a channel. Had this incredible day on Amazon. It's like, oh, that's great, but it's, tomorrow will be that. And then it was the same the next day and the next day, and then a week later, our website just did the same thing. And within 10 days, we were a bigger business than we had been in January.
No way, really.
So April 2020 was a record
And presumably
month.
you weren't that well known either at this point, were you, as a brand?
No, I think we were kind of, timing wise, I guess we were fortunate in that we had enough distribution in the on-trade that people recognised us. And one of the things that people were doing was thinking, I'm going to be stuck at home. What are all the things I like having out when I go out for a meal or go to the pub? I want those things at home now. So we were sort of, there was enough of, but we weren't so big that we couldn't do things that would make a massive difference. Emma Heel, our MD, she'd just joined, and we remember we were like,
lucky timing.
Yeah, it's but Emma was incredible. She was literally like roll sleeves up, so just relish that like challenge. And we just started deploying money on Facebook, and that was just working unbelievably well. So there's a bunch of stuff, and then so that was the kind of first stage. Then we went hard at grocery, because that was the kind of next only channel, and we won listings across Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Majestic, Ocado, all that summer of 2020. Is this in
that first year of pandemic?
Yeah, so that summer, 4 months after the pandemic, we were across all this grocery distribution, and then the on-trade business started coming back. And
So perversely, do you think you're a better business because of the pandemic, weirdly? Because it did accelerate you into different channels that maybe you might have been slower to adopt had it not been for that?
Yeah, I think definitely. And it just forced us to get unbelievably focused on what was important. 2020 was strange because we hit targets in 2020, but just not in the way that we expected. And then in 2021, our business was a third on-trade, off-trade, D2C, which is this incredible mix of equal channel split, which is ended up in a really good place.
Now, fast forward to now, you've now opened a pub, haven't you? The Lucky Saint, naturally. that naming didn't take long, did it, to come up with?
No, although we threw a few other things around, but it was a bit like, it was sort of like, why look a gift horse in the mouth? Plus, it's quite a good name for a pub.
Yeah. Were there any Lucky Saints before?
No.
We've had that. So that's original as an idea.
Yeah, funny enough, I've never checked, but
yeah,
I hope
it does
so.
sound like a pub name, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you say it, you just go, yeah, we'll pop down the Lucky Saint.
And it was an idea, funny enough, that came out of that original. After the first lockdown, we'd obviously given up our offices, and we were 6 people in lockdown, and then by the end of that year, we were 15 or 16 people. And we were desperate to kind of get back into an office and get everyone back together, and had this idea about, well, what if we took, surely all these pubs are really struggling, maybe we could rent the room above a pub, and that could be our office, and wouldn't it be fun? And we'd become great friends with the landlord downstairs. And then that idea sort of morphed into, well, what if we ran the pub downstairs? And then that morphed into the sort of the ultimate kind of vision, which is, a brand home, a sort of physical manifestation of the brand, home for our team, and then this it's going to become this data and insight engine, so we can actually learn firsthand how we can kind of positively influence consumer choices within the pub environment.
Do you experiment, can you, with different things, pricing or serve or temperature or all sorts of things?
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah. Menu placement, what goes on blackboards, and then track it. And then the idea we're going to produce a white paper on our learnings, and then publish those back into the trade.
And do you sell any alcohol on site? Is it a dry pub?
No. So it's a full. So if you didn't know the Lucky Saint brand, you could walk into it.
So you operate it as a normal pub.
It operates as a totally normal pub. We sell the best of all drinks of all strengths.
Yeah.
It's not the M&M's world of Lucky Saint. You walk in, the only branding is the tap badge. Yeah. Everything else is just like our interpretation on a great pub. Yeah. But it's been amazing. It's been amazing kind of team-wise for I don't know, a company at our stage to we've got an amazing team, and now we're above a pub, so it's difficult. You walk down at the end of the day and it's difficult to make it to the door without like someone sort of grabbing you, but let's have a quick pint.
Oh, brilliant. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And so if you're operating as a normal pub, presumably you get to see the sales of Lucky Saint versus a real world example of how you perform versus regular beer, or do you have any competitor non-alcoholic beers in the range?
Yeah, we have like our non-out range in general is really comprehensive, I guess, for a pub. We also the tension that we're always trying to kind of balance is we want it to be representative of what a trading pub could realistically do, but also kind of show like what we think like best in class would look like. So we've got like amazing non-out spirits, we've got the best of non-out wines, amazing cocktail menu, fridge full of non-out beers, amazing full strength beers.
Wow.
So
if you weren't doing non-alcoholic beer, what non-alcoholic would you do? If you look at the rest of the market, go, I've tested it, that's where you should go next. No, I don't mean Lucky Saint, but if you were someone else looking at the marketplace, I mean wine, for example, I can't imagine having a non-alcoholic wine.
No, I mean,
but maybe that's me.
It feels like non-alcoholic wine's probably the biggest opportunity, also the most difficult to solve. There's so much kind of complexity in wine, and what alcohol does is it there's no flavour in alcohol, but it carries flavour. So if you don't have alcohol in wine, you're just losing the kind of the depth and the complexity.
So you need the unfiltered equivalent of what you've done with beer to somehow maintain the flavour without losing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So one of the challenges I would have for you talked about how non-alcoholic category is like 0.5% in the UK. It's something like 6% in Germany. I can't remember what the number was, 14% maybe in Spain. Now, my experience of, going out a night out, wherever, with friends, I'm not drinking, they're on these, wonderful continental lagers. I'll be on that warm orange juice, that, made from concentrate in a small 200 ml kind of serve, feeling like I've really missed out. But if I'm honest, the thing is if I have a non-alcoholic beer, I don't really believe it's going to taste as good. It doesn't look good, does it? It looks like the kind of diet version that I'm, slightly kind of compromising. How do you convince people? Because you've got to grow the market, right? You only succeed if more people come into the category. How do you get them into the category? Yeah,
I guess there's traditionally alcohol-free beers been in a supermarket, at the back of the supermarket on the bottom shelf somewhere. And I guess my whole thing about Lucky Saint was to try and make this category aspirational in the way that other drinks categories are aspirational. And I guess the holy grail is like the ultimate drinking experience for beer is the pint in the British pub. It's a complete institution. And so that's been what we've been like, we've massively focused on trying to introduce alcohol-free beer on draft. And so we launched it in 2020, beginning of 2020, just pre-COVID originally, and then have seen like huge success behind that. And I think it is all down to the fact that you can stand with your friends. And
you're in the round, right?
You're in the round. And I always think of it like all beers become equal once they're all in a pint glass. Yeah. And then in turn, I think what that's ended up also doing is what we call like the power of omnichannel. So we know that consumers discover us in a pub and end up buying us through our website or in a supermarket. And so the channel, it's a flywheel, because you start seeing it everywhere, and maybe you've seen it on draft in a pub, but you were drinking on that occasion, so you didn't actually have it, but it's still the visibility that you get from it that then means that when you see it in a supermarket, you do pick it up. So it's ended up being, we're like huge kind of proponents of omni-channel advantage in the pattern. Like effectively, we sort of view it as like it's our marketing to a large extent, and then the pint, of course, is just that it's the holy grail,
hero, isn't it? Yeah, it's the signature thing. I mean, the other thing about the packaging as well that I notice is you don't really scream about the 0%. do you at all? Really, it's you have to put your glasses on to see it. In fact, so if you're in the round, actually, does anyone drink a pint of Lucky Saint thinking they're having an alcoholic beer?
Yeah, I tell you what I hear a lot of is, and I'll give you the real example. We heard from bartender at one of our pubs saying, "Yeah, I had 4 lads in last night, and each time one of them would come to the bar to do their round, they'd get 3 full strength beers and 1 Lucky Saint, and they didn't realise that they were all doing the same thing." So they were all trying to. When it was their round, they were buying Lucky Saint for themselves and then giving everyone else a full strength drink.
Oh, that's genius! Have you ever had a situation where they've been buying rounds and they go, "Lads, we're not very pissed yet." It's like they didn't realise.
But yeah, no, the packaging. Yeah, it was the ambition. Kind of was talking about this earlier today, like. What you're drinking says about, and the brand that drinking, or the type of drink that you're drinking, and the brand says about you. And I always think the most acute example is if you go on a first date with someone, whether you drink a glass of champagne, or a mug of bitter, or an 8%, New England IPA, says an enormous amount about who you are. And one of the things I kind of always the ambition was always to solve was that someone would feel positive about drinking a Lucky Saint on a first date because it said something positive about them.
I love the positioning, saving first dates since 2016. How many second dates have happened on the back of a Lucky Saint?
But therefore, yeah, it doesn't say alcohol free on the bottle. No, it was always. I think, given where the categories come from and perceptions of the category, I've always just felt like everything that we do needs to be done to a higher level and be. We need to overcome that challenge around perception. So every packaging touch point that we do, like our D2C packaging, is beautiful, and people still post about it on social media when they get it, just so that everything that you touch and feel around Lucky Saint feels like a quality experience, so that you get this overall, we're slowly, hopefully, but surely kind of changing this perception around alcohol-free beer being a less than proposition.
So we talked about a lot of the challenges, and COVID being a big one, getting a brewery to agree to do it in the first place, how you raise investment, all those kind of things. Flipping it a bit, as you look back, what have been the secrets to success over the last few years that have set you up for where you got to today?
I guess stuff that I just love the brand, and building that brand and having kind of relentless focus on it. And we've over 5 years we've worked really hard on kind of creating this brand architecture that allows us to kind of, I guess, keep executing in ways that hopefully remain it remains really engaging. So I guess, really proud of that brand and the work that we've done there. The thing that's still taken me by surprise the most is team. So if I wind back, the biggest team I ever worked in was a team of 3 in a pre-Lucky Saint world, and I'd never managed anyone. So it's been an unbelievable kind of learning journey. I just hadn't considered the importance and the power of team, and I'm not sure I can articulate how we've done it, but we've sort of got this amazing team and amazing culture, and it's very humbling to sort of work with a group of people who are so motivated and passionate about what we're doing. And as I said, it's hard to articulate how that's happened, but it's something that I guess it's just, I guess if it's advice, it's trying to figure out how to foster that, because it is one of our values is get lucky, and which is basically, I always think nothing in this business happens unless someone does it, and to have 60 people who are all making it happen is the most powerful thing.
That's really good advice. It's funny, it reminds me, I had a very brief stint in private equity and invested in a soft drink business. And I remember when I met them, I said, look, okay, what's the secret to success when you make an investment and so on? I was expecting some very complicated answer. I was expecting sort of spreadsheets and formulas for how you manage a business, this kind of thing. They said we do three things. Number one, we hire the very best designers that we can possibly afford to get the positioning and the brand design right. They said, nail that, you're flying, firstly. Number two, we invest in the best people in the industry, like with the best experience. We hire, they described it as 2 rungs above. They're just like, we just go all in for the best people we can find. The third thing they said is we will invest in capacity and cost reductions. It sounds a bit brutal, but they said, unless you've got the potential to grow 3, 4, 5 times a year, then you're not going to realise the opportunity. So you invest ahead of the curve, as they'd call it. And so in this case, we built a whole new factory, and you think, spent £1.5 million on day one, thinking, whoa! But it reduced costs, it improved efficiency, it improved agility, it did a whole lot of things. But it's interesting, that was their playbook. It was as simple as that. Those 3 things.
I always think so. Shalane, our chairman, always talks about this kind of interesting thing about startups, which is a slightly different twist on what you were just saying, but is big companies are built on efficiency. Like everything that big companies do is trying to be more efficient. And the reason that they're by and large not very good at creating new brands and new concepts is because you have to, like, startups actually embrace inefficiency really lean into it. Yeah. And I look at like so many things that we've done at Lucky Saint and the way that we built it have been like wildly inefficient, but have given us permission to go on and do the next things.
You are so spot on, because if you think if you're Beck's, right, the inefficiency of having a Beck's Blue or whatever, and then you have to slow the line down, switch it over. You've got another SKU, you've got another point of sale kit, you've got another, You're absolutely right. Innovation creates inefficiency if you're a large, efficient organisation. But that means people like you can succeed.
Yeah,
because you're not constrained by it. Luke, it's been an absolute blast, mate. Thank you so much for telling the story. I really inspired listening to you, I have to say. And there's so many. I love all the little nuggets and stories and how you arrived at where you are, which is just so interesting.
No, thanks for having me, John, and thanks for not giving me a hard time on any of the marketing stuff.
You've done an amazing job. As I say, we did put your stuff through System 1 tests, and you outperformed the average startup comfortably. So well done.
I was daunted by the CMO brief and thinking like I'm well out of my depth.
Do you know what? Most CMOs I know want to be startup founders and act more like that. That's the irony, isn't it? Like most CMOs are sat there, how do we become more startup? How do we become more agile, take more risks, back ourselves, build a team that really, really cares? And that's what you're doing. So there's a lot to be inspired by. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, John.
Thank you so much for listening to the Uncensored CMO. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to hear more like that, then please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button there too and never miss an episode again. If you want to contact me, I'm over at Twitter @UncensoredCMO, or find me on LinkedIn where I'm under my own name, John Evans. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope you'll join me next time.